Next up, we wanted to talk a bit about a report from a friend of the show, Nick Hausman at House of Wrestling, who is reporting that, so last week, Billy Corgan went on Busted Open Radio and stated that they have not one, but two television deals with a top 20 network. And Nick Hausman is reporting that those deals are with the CW, which is technically a network, but sort of there's like the big four networks, and then CW is, the home of formerly the home of Riverdale.
Well, SmackDown as well, but okay.
SmackDown was on Riverdale. But Riverdale was one of their big shows. That was
they've had many big shows. I have to imagine. Was Riverdale the biggest
CW?
one you could think of? Flash.
Yeah, I guess so.
Maybe not that big, evidently.
Well, and nonetheless, Nick is reporting that this will be for NWA Power, and then a behind the scenes kind of a reality series about running the NWA, which I can only imagine what that will entail. But I mean, would certainly seem like Billy Corgan probably being the person front and center in a behind the scenes sort of reality series. But I would say for the NWA, I mean, whenever it comes to a television deal, the key is what are the financials of the deal. I mean, our CW, I mean, they made a pretty bold move a number of months ago where like no one was touching Live Golf, and CW, they took a flyer on Live Golf. It wasn't a very big deal for Live Golf, but they were expanding more into sports. And this is at least an example of I would say like a decent sized outlet that is looking at professional wrestling that is not named WWE and is not named AEW. So, I mean, this is kind of the big moment for the NWA. Like how big of a deal is this for them monetarily, and what can they do with this? Because sometimes we've seen outlets that like Women of Wrestling, which by the way, I watched my first episode of Women of Wrestling last week. I felt the need that I need to watch this.
You were on vacation and you're like, I gotta watch this, like this one thing.
And listen, Women of Wrestling, like you can follow Brandon Thurston's like numbers. Like this thing does more viewership than many of the wrestling shows that we give ample time to, like, and dwarfs some of them. And I don't know what the end goal is for Women of Wrestling beyond just it's a syndicated package, a very strong syndicated package that has viewership every week. And that's, it's filling programming, but it's sort of like they don't run live events. They don't run pay-per-views. They don't, but they have a following. It's like at, 300,000 to 400,000 viewers. It's notable. The NWA has more of like a traditional wrestling business plan attached to them, but this has been years for the NWA to try and get something going. They have been popping up from YouTube to they tried out Fight TV. They've tried the streaming deal, and now this is a big spotlight for them.
I'm happy that there's another place for professional wrestlers to go to that seems to be, on the upswing and can provide a prominent stage for a lot of talent out there to get on television. I am maybe a little surprised that it happens to be the NWA. Not so much when you think about how these deals might tend to take place. The fact that Billy Corgan is a very recognized person, and I'm sure has many connections that your typical wrestling promoter may not. But as far as the hardcore wrestling fan goes, this is not a promotion that has really received great headlines over the past several years. Between the
now retired Tyrus.
Well, yeah. I mean, Billy Corgan's choice of talent to bring on, his choice of putting the title on Tyrus, and that's not even speaking of some of the misfortunes that came over the company throughout the pandemic, and then through speaking out and everything as well. So I mean, this will definitely give it a huge boost in terms of relevancy for a wrestling promotion that's out there that has a lot of potential eyeballs that could watch it. So, I wait to see what the product looks like. I'm especially curious about the reality show.
Yeah, sometimes you wonder if that is like how much buzz have you seen among the OVW series on Netflix?
I hear people talk about it. I've not at all been motivated to check it out, but I have seen discussion. Netflix is a pretty prominent platform.
It's a huge platform. It's not like this thing was just buried under there. This was prominently featured, and it for many people, that's their entry point into OVW. And if they've heard of OVW, it's or at least a generation ago when it was developmental.
But at this point, a documentary about the behind the scenes, aspect of booking an independent wrestling promotion is really not all that novel in 2023. We've kind of seen it to death over the past 20 years, I would say. So for that reason, it doesn't really, like, we have, AEW versions of the same thing. We have pretty much we've seen enough, Beyond the Mats and things like that to kind of have a good grasp of it. So I'm not really craving it. What this NWA reality show might have going for it is the fact that, I mean, Billy Corgan is a name. It'd be kind of curious, I'd be kind of curious to see what he's like operating a professional wrestling promotion. But beyond that, to be honest, I'm curious, but I'm not that curious either.
Yeah, it's one that, I mean, you want to see as many of these companies be able to find their audience, and the more places for people to go, the better. But how often do you and I talk about the hours to consume professional wrestling? And here is another, say, 2 hours between these two shows that you're throwing at fans. We grew up at a time when, man, a new wrestling show is starting on a network. It was like, man, you would just gobble up everything you could see. That's the furthest thing from the current wrestling fan that is inundated with so much great wrestling. And that's something the NWA, I mean, listen, there's some great talent in the NWA, but is there that one calling card that is going to grab a fan that is this the most cutting edge product? I mean, their whole thing was like being a throwback product, and they're sort of like in the middle. Like, again, there's some very good performers there, but there's also a lot of stuff in there that is, not what the modern wrestling fan is looking for in great numbers.
Yeah, I'm curious to know what exact type of fan he has in mind that he's been booking his product for. Who is he trying to attract, and will the CW lend him that audience that he seeks?
Well, this should promise for many more Billy Corgan interviews, and that is music to Andrew Thompson's ears. Okay, if he has a Mount Rushmore, I would guess it would be Bret Hart, maybe Billy Corgan / Tyrus. I mean,
yeah. Forget Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness. He's putting on a Billy Corgan interview talking about the NWA as his audio fix.